The greatest Springbok that ever lived. That's the title, maybe. Eben Etzebeth, the great Eben Etzebeth, will become the most capped Springbok at the weekend with 128 caps for South Africa. That puts him in GOAT status. And that's not me saying that. That's everyone else saying that. And this isn't a love letter to Eben Etzebeth. This is just a mark of respect for a phenomenal man who I've locked horns with in the past and who I admire greatly. So, firstly, on my YouTube page, it's been quiet on here. I've been working out what to do, so to strategically in the background trying to work out like what we're going to use this page for. And it isn't going to be all about South African rugby, but as they are the best team in the world, or the second best team in the world now, if you go based on World Rugby's rankings, they're behind Ireland. But I am going to populate it with these kind of videos, and not all love letters, just a little bit of insight, some opinion. So if you are enjoying the page, please subscribe to it. Please leave a comment and all of them things, because it boosts the algorithm. It improves the page and means I'll be able to put out some more content. So thank you to everyone in the past who's contributed to the page, a comment, an interaction. But I need to do more, and I will do more. Right, on to Eben Etzebeth. As I say, locked horns with him in Nelspruit 10 years ago, where basically a young buck on the scene coming through for South Africa had no idea who he was. It was all about Victor Matfield and Bakis Botha. No one could top the physicality of Bakis Botha. No one could have the guile of Victor Matfield. Well, on that day in Nelspruit, little did I know that that man, Eben Etzebeth, would go on to be a hybrid between the both of them. Not only does he have my respect and admiration, anyone I've spoken to, I was lucky enough to go over to Japan to interview some of the world's greatest rugby players, Brodie Retallick, Ardie Savea, his teammate Peter Steph du Toit. I interviewed Sia Khaleesi in Paris last year as well. And anyone you speak to really around the world. I did a documentary back in South Africa pre-COVID, and I was saying, sorry, Sia. I was saying, oh, Sia Khaleesi, Sia Khaleesi. They were like, no, Eben Etzebeth, do you know him? I was like, fucking hell, I do know him. So he is one of the most recognisable figures in rugby. He's a superstar. And for me, I think, when people say, oh, you wax lyrical about the Springboks, oh, Eben this, Eben that. It's nothing to do with that. It's just a sign of respect to a man that's going to be the most capped Springbok amongst some of the greatest, not even Springboks, some of the greatest rugby players to have played our game. And the conversation will be like, where does Eben rank as one of the greats? If you go based on what Victor Matfield is saying, and you can only follow one of the GOATs in what he's saying, I'll just copy what he's saying. He said that Eben will go down as one of the very best Springboks ever, if not the best. And that's the conversation for fans, isn't it? You think about who are the great Springboks of years gone by. Yes, Eben's going to take over from Victor Matfield. The game is very different now. There's more games. Victor Matfield was a phenomenal player, played against him a few times in his own right, and I played against Bakis Botha as well. I think a lot of people in their mind thought Victor was more of a flair player, more guile, not as physical, because you had Bakis Botha fucking monstering people and taking people's heads off, mine included. But Victor was very physical in his own right, very good with ball in hand, but just obviously his super skill was the line out. As we know, Eben takes over from Victor as the most capped Springbok at the weekend, and the likelihood is, off the back of it, they'll win the Rugby Championship as well. But Argentina were very good last weekend, as we've gone into. But just looking at the list of the greatest Springboks ever, Victor Matfield near the top of that list. Bakis Botha, the conversation would be around him. Kind of changed the modern game, because you had the old school and the modern game merging. And Bakis, he would have been probably the best amateur player we've ever seen, but turns out to be one of the best modern players we've ever seen as well. The great Peter Steph du Toit, he's definitely going to be in the conversation for greatest Springbok. Sia Khaleesi, of course, back-to-back world champion, and his story that goes with that as well. Like, he's an icon, not just in rugby, but in sport now. He's an icon of sport. John Smith, my good friend John Smith as well, he'll be in the conversation. Scout Burger for me was the toughest mofo I have ever played against, and the loveliest human being as well, and a good friend. I'd put Scott Berger in the conversation. Cheslin Colby, again, doing the rounds in South Africa. Whenever you say Springboks, a lot of people say Cheslin Colby. It's the glitz and glamour of that. And off the back of that, you've got Brian Habana, two very similar players. And when you score the tries and the glory, is that enough in South Africa to be perceived as a great? Well, when you've got a list like this, who is the greatest of the great? That's what we're trying to unfold. So you can let us know underneath. The late Joos van der Westhuizen, an icon as well. And you think of the 97's Lions tour, that was my first understanding of, I suppose, the real values of what it is to be a Springboks and just the physicality, the dirty, the dark arts of the game. Yes, we know about 95, but 97's when people over this side of the world got a real insight into what it was like to play against the Springboks. And meeting Joos van der Westhuizen once he had his MND diagnosis, which was extremely sad, it was just an absolute honour because he was another icon of rugby and a Springbok as well. John de Villiers, he'd be in the conversation. A lot of players actually would say John de Villiers is one of the greatest. It's meant to sound South African. It didn't. A few of the names that I've put in the mix as well. And this one needs debating because for me, Rassie Erasmus will go down as one of the greatest Springboks. Maybe not as the player, but as the man and as the coach. So he's played for the Springboks, right? So why would he not be in the conversation as the greatest Springbok to have ever played for South Africa? Because he is a Springbok, and the way that he coaches, and I go back to where these videos took real momentum, was around the Chasing the Sun 2 documentary, which was just phenomenal insight. I spoke to Felix Jones the other day on the phone. Lovely man. But Rassie Erasmus has to be in that conversation as the greatest Springboks because of what he's done for the team. And he's a Springbok. A couple of other names as well. And one of them I love. One of them I like, but I don't know him well enough to love him. But the one that I like is Joel Stransky. Iconic. Drop goal. The other one is Francois Pienaar. Now, sometimes when you mention Francois to people, they'll be like, no, he only got 20-odd caps for the Springboks. But that moment in 95 with Nelson Mandela, I'm actually building a house down the road, and I've got a picture ready to go on my wall because that was one of, if not the most iconic image I've ever seen in rugby. Tell me another. Joe Lomu, monster in the England team, a snapshot, freeze frame of that. But Francois Pienaar for me, because of the importance of the legacy that left for sport and left, I think, for South Africa. I don't know enough about the histories and the ins and outs politically, emotionally of that moment. But I know Francois Pienaar very well. I love the bloke. He's one of life's great humans. He's a great rugby man. And that moment with Nelson Mandela lifting the World Cup in 95 was just unbelievable, really. So he has to be in the conversation. But I don't know whether it's because I am all about the now and all about the moment. But the moment and the now is all about Eben Etzebeth. I mentioned I played against him. Physical man. And there's a caricature sometimes around Eben because you see all the clips of him grabbing people, whatever team it is, when he plays against Lavanini or Kremer for Argentina, or he's got the Australians, he's holding them by the throat, or he's dominating Maro Itoje. Like, whoever it is, he's got that in him, right? It's the enforcer. Victor Matfield said he's actually a combination of Victor himself and Backes. He's the enforcer that can do them things, that's got the physicality, that can clear bodies out. The physicality aside, the athleticism, the kick-off returns that he can do, the knockback against France, the athleticism to move the body that is that big is something to behold. And that's when you speak to Brodie Retallick, who is one of the greatest locks to have ever played the game, ever. And he says, Eben Etzebeth, he's the one. So take out the physicality and that part of the game. That's there. Unbelievable line out forward. Stands at the front of the line out, but can move. He's not that old school jam to the front. But it is the influences that he has, whether or not he's carrying, whether or not he's cleaning, whether or not he's returning back on kickoff, line out. It's everything. Like, he has the complete game. And to be able to have 128 caps in this era with where the game is, how physical it is. And yes, there's more games, I mentioned that. But in order to do that in a position where he's 32, he's got another World Cup cycle in him. So he's going to get 150 caps. And that's the phenomenal thing in this. And we saw Richie McCaw similar, went through the gears at the back end of his career and got better and better. I think that that's what we see with someone like Eben Etzebeth. He's been on the bench, he's being managed, he's now back at the Sharks, and with that there'll be a management balance because of the amount of games in the URC. You've got the Champions Cup as well. But he's going to do another World Cup cycle. And again, I go back to chasing the sun too. It was really, really cool to see the interactions between him, his players, to see the beef between him and Dwayne Vermeulen and be able to come through that. Dwayne's now coaching as well, but the level of respect and admiration that people have for the great Eben Etzebeth. So I just wanted to come on and do a bit of a tribute, but also just to ask the question, like, who is the greatest Springbok of all time? Let us know below. And please subscribe and like the channel, and I'll do a few more love letters to all you haters.